Before I begin this story that will absolutely break your heart and then rebuild it stronger than ever, I want you to do something for me. Right now, pause for just a moment and tell me in the comments below, where in the world are you watching this from? Are you curled up in bed in New York? Maybe you're taking a break from work in London? Or perhaps you're listening while cooking dinner in Mumbai. I read every single comment, and knowing you're there with me makes this story so much more powerful. And here's the thing. If this story touches your heart the way I know it will, please hit that subscribe button right below this video. It's completely free, costs you nothing, but it changes everything. When you subscribe, you're not just getting videos. You're joining an inner circle of people who understand that real stories, raw emotions, and genuine human experiences matter. You become part of a community that believes in the power of storytelling to heal, to connect, and to transform lives. Oh, and before we dive in, if you want access to stories I can't share on YouTube, the ones that are too raw, too real, too intimate for this platform, make sure you sign up for our newsletter. The link is in the description. These are the stories that happen behind closed doors, the secrets that change everything, the moments that define who we become. Now, let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah Martinez was the kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday, who always had a tissue ready when someone was crying, who would give you the last slice of pizza even if she was starving. At 32, she had this rare quality that seems to be disappearing from our world. She genuinely cared more about other people's happiness than her own. Her dark hair always smelled like vanilla because she baked for her neighbors every Sunday. Her brown eyes lit up when she talked about her husband's achievements as if they were her own personal victories. And David. Oh, David Martinez. He was her everything. They'd been married for 8 years, and Sarah still looked at him like he hung the moon and painted the stars just for her. When he got promoted to senior marketing director at Henderson & Associates last month, Sarah cried actual tears of joy, not because of the money, not because of the status, but because she knew how hard he'd worked, how many late nights he'd put in, how many dreams he'd poured into that company. What Sarah didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly imagined as she planned a perfect surprise lunch to celebrate his success, was that in exactly 47 minutes, her entire world would shatter into pieces so small she'd wonder if she'd ever be able to put herself back together again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to show you just how deep this betrayal would cut, and why what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and the masks people wear. Sarah and David's love story began like something out of a romantic movie, the kind that makes you believe in soulmates and forever. They met at a coffee shop near the university where Sarah was finishing her master's degree in elementary education. David was 26, fresh out of business school, wearing a suit that was slightly too big for his lean frame, and carrying a briefcase that looked more expensive than his car probably was. Sarah was sitting by the window, grading papers from her student teaching assignment, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, completely absorbed in writing encouraging comments on a third grader's essay about their pet hamster. David later told her that what caught his attention wasn't her beauty, though she was beautiful, but the way she smiled while reading those papers, the way she genuinely cared about those kids, even the ones who turned in assignments covered in peanut butter fingerprints. He spilled coffee on himself trying to work up the courage to talk to her. Sarah, being Sarah, immediately grabbed napkins and helped clean up the mess, apologizing as if it was somehow her fault. They talked for 3 hours that day. 3 hours that turned into daily coffee meetings, then dinner dates, then lazy Sunday mornings, then a proposal in that same coffee shop 2 years later. Sarah, David had said, getting down on one knee right next to their regular table by the window, "You make me want to be the kind of man who deserves someone like you." She said yes before he even finished asking the question. Their wedding was small, intimate, perfect. Sarah wore her grandmother's dress, which she'd altered herself, staying up until 2 a.m. for 3 weeks straight to get every detail right. David's mother had wanted them to have a big, expensive celebration, but Sarah convinced him that all that mattered was them, their families, and the promises they were making each other. In her wedding photos, Sarah glowed, not just from professional makeup or the perfect lighting, but from pure, unfiltered happiness. She looked at David like he was everything she'd ever dreamed of and more. And David looked at her like he couldn't believe his luck. The early years of their marriage were the kind that other couples envied. They were a team. When David decided to pursue his MBA while working full-time, Sarah took on extra tutoring jobs to help cover their expenses. She'd pack his dinner every night when he left for evening classes, always with a little note that said something silly like, "You're smarter than you think and more love than you know," or, "Don't forget to eat the cookies I made. They have extra love in them." When David graduated and started his job at Henderson and Associates as a junior marketing associate, Sarah threw him a surprise party with all their friends and family. She'd spent weeks planning every detail, from his favorite chocolate cake to a photo slideshow of his journey through business school. She stood up at the party and gave a toast that made every person in that room believe in love again. "To my husband," she'd said, raising her glass of champagne, "who dreams bigger than the sky and works harder than anyone I know. Your success is our success. Your dreams are our dreams. And watching you chase those dreams is the greatest privilege of my life." David had tears in his eyes as he kissed her that night. But success, as Sarah would learn the most painful way possible, sometimes comes at a price she never agreed to pay. As David climbed the corporate ladder at Henderson and Associates, their life began to change in subtle ways. The late nights at the office became more frequent. The weekend work sessions became routine. David would come home exhausted, stressed, sometimes barely able to hold a conversation over dinner. Sarah, ever the supportive wife, adapted. She learned to keep his dinner warm in the oven for hours. She stopped making plans for Friday nights because he might have to work late. She took over all the household responsibilities so that David could focus entirely on his career. Grocery shopping, bill paying, cleaning, social obligations with their families. Sarah handled it all without complaint. When David missed their 5th wedding anniversary because of an important client presentation, Sarah didn't say a word. She just moved their dinner reservation to the following week and spent the evening alone, looking through their wedding album and telling herself that sacrifices were what marriage was about. When he missed her birthday dinner because his boss needed him to work on a proposal, Sarah smiled and said she understood. She ate birthday cake alone in their kitchen, making a wish that things would get easier once he got settled in his career. And they did get easier in some ways. David's hard work paid off. Promotions came regularly. First a marketing associate, then senior associate, then account manager, then senior account manager. With each promotion came more money, more recognition, more responsibility, and unfortunately, more time away from home. Sarah told herself that this was temporary, that once David reached his goal of becoming a director, things would calm down. They'd be able to start the family they'd talked about. They'd take those weekend trips they used to dream about. They'd go back to having lazy Sunday mornings and long conversations over coffee. She held on to that hope like a lifeline. 3 weeks ago, David came home with news that made Sarah's heart soar. He'd been promoted to senior marketing director, the position he'd been working toward for 4 years. He was practically glowing when he walked through their front door, loosening his tie with one hand and pulling Sarah into his arms with the other. "We did it, baby," he said, spinning her around their living room. Senior director, corner office, everything we've been working for. Sarah cried, actually cried tears of pure joy and relief. All those lonely dinners, all those missed anniversaries, all those nights she'd fallen asleep alone while David worked late. It had all been worth it. They'd finally made it. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered against his chest. So incredibly proud. That night, they made love for the first time in weeks, and Sarah felt like they were reconnecting, like they were finally going to get their life back. The next morning, as David got dressed for his first day in his new position, Sarah was already making plans. She would surprise him with lunch at his office. Something special. Something that showed him how much his success meant to her, how proud she was to be his wife. For the past 3 weeks, she'd been planning every detail of this surprise. She'd taken a personal day from her job at Riverside Elementary, where she now taught 4th grade. She'd researched David's favorite restaurant and convinced him to prepare a special lunch basket with all his favorite foods. The truffle pasta he'd order on their first date, the chocolate tart he always got for special occasions, and a bottle of the champagne they'd shared on their wedding night. This morning, Sarah woke up at 5:30 a.m., an hour before her alarm, because she was too excited to sleep. She showered and put on the blue dress David had complimented her on just last week, the one that brought out her eyes. She styled her hair the way he liked it, loose and wavy around her shoulders. She even put on the perfume he bought her for Christmas, the one he said reminded him of flowers and happiness. At exactly 10:15 a.m., Sarah picked up the lunch basket from Romano's Italian Bistro. The manager, Mrs. Romano, had outdone herself. Everything was perfect. The food was still warm, the champagne was properly chilled, and there were even 2 long-stemmed red roses tied with ribbon that matched Sarah's dress. "Your husband is a very lucky woman," Mrs. Romano said with her thick Italian accent and warm smile. "You can see the love in everything you do for him." Sarah beamed. "He deserves it. He's worked so hard for this promotion." As she drove toward Henderson and Associates, Sarah felt lighter than she had in months, maybe years. This surprise wasn't just about celebrating David's promotion. It was about celebrating them, their partnership, their future. It was about showing David that no matter how busy life got, no matter how many late nights and missed dinners there were, she would always be his biggest supporter, his safe harbor, his home. She parked in the visitors section of the Henderson and Associates parking garage and took a moment to check her appearance in the rearview mirror. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement. Her eyes were bright with love and pride. She looked like a woman who was completely, utterly happy with her life and her marriage. She looked like a woman who had no idea that in exactly 3 minutes, everything she believed about her husband, her marriage, and her own worth would be destroyed. Sarah gathered a lunch basket, straightened her dress, and walked toward the elevator that would take her to the 15th floor, to David's new corner office, to what she thought would be one of the happiest moments of their marriage. She was humming their wedding song as the elevator doors opened. She was still humming it as she walked down the hallway toward David's office, her heels clicking softly on the polished marble floor, the lunch basket swinging gently in her hand. She was still humming it when she reached David's office door and heard voices inside, his voice and another voice, a woman's voice, speaking in tones that were intimate, familiar, wrong. Sarah's humming stopped. Her hand froze on the door handle. And in that moment, suspended between innocence and knowledge, between the life she thought she had and the truth she was about to discover, Sarah Martinez took her last breath as a completely trusting wife. The celebration of love, the years of sacrifice, the hopes and dreams built on what Sarah believed was solid ground. But we know what's coming next, don't we? We know that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest. I need you to tell me in the comments. Have you ever had that moment where you realized someone you loved wasn't who you thought they were? Share your story below, because I know many of you understand exactly what Sarah is about to go through. And if you're not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button now. This story gets so much more intense, so much more emotional, and I don't want you to miss a single moment. Plus, when you subscribe, you join thousands of others who believe that sharing our stories, the good, the bad, and the absolutely heartbreaking, is how we heal and grow stronger together. Time moves differently when your world is about to end. Sarah would later remember these next few moments in excruciating detail. The way the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the scent of coffee and copier toner in the air, the weight of the lunch basket in her trembling hand. She would remember how her heart was still full of love and excitement right up until the second it shattered completely. The voices behind David's office door were clearer now, his voice deep and familiar, but speaking in a tone she'd never heard before. Soft, intimate, almost vulnerable. "I can't keep doing this, Victoria. It's eating me alive." Victoria. Sarah's breath caught. Victoria Henderson, David's boss, the woman who owned Henderson and Associates. The woman Sarah had met at company Christmas parties. The sophisticated blonde in her early 40s who always wore designer suits and spoke with the confidence of someone who'd built an empire from nothing. The woman Sarah had actually admired, had even felt grateful to her for recognizing David's potential and promoting him so quickly. "David, darling," came Victoria's voice, smooth as silk and intimate as a whisper between lovers. "We've talked about this. What we have is special. It's not something you just throw away because you feel guilty." Sarah's hand was still on the door handle, but she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was hearing. "But Sarah doesn't deserve this," David said, and even through her shock, Sarah felt a twisted sense of gratitude that he was defending her. "She's been so supportive, so patient. She's sacrificed everything for my career, and I'm..." "You're what? Happy? Fulfilled? Finally with someone who understands your ambition." Victoria's voice was closer now, as if she'd moved toward him. "Sarah's a lovely woman, David, but she's simple. She's content with her little teaching job and her little domestic life. I understand who you really are. I understand your drive, your hunger for success. We're partners in every sense of the word." The lunch basket slipped from Sarah's fingers, but she caught it just before it hit the floor. The champagne bottle clinked softly against the container, and she froze, terrified they might have heard. "She doesn't understand me the way you do," David said quietly, and those 7 words hit Sarah like a physical blow to her chest. "When I'm with you, I feel like the man I was meant to be. Powerful, important, like I can conquer the world." "Exactly." Victoria's voice was triumphant now. "And what does Sarah make you feel like? A suburban husband with a mortgage and responsibilities? David, you're destined for greatness. I can give you that greatness. I am giving you that greatness." There was a sound then, a soft intake of breath, the rustle of clothing. Sarah's rational mind knew she should leave, should walk away, should preserve whatever dignity she had left. But her body wouldn't obey. She was frozen, trapped between the life she thought she knew and the truth that was destroying her with every word. "I love the way you kiss me," Victoria whispered, and Sarah's knees almost buckled. "Like you're claiming something that belongs to you." "You do belong to me." David's voice was rough now, passionate in a way that Sarah hadn't heard in years. "God, Victoria, what you do to me." Sarah's hand found the door handle again, and before she could stop herself, before she could think about consequences or preservation of dignity or anything else, she was turning it. The door opened silently on well-oiled hinges, and Sarah Martinez stepped into a scene that would be burned into her memory forever. David had Victoria pressed against his new mahogany desk, his hands tangled in her perfectly styled blonde hair. Her designer suit jacket was unbuttoned, her lipstick smeared. They were kissing like teenagers, like people who couldn't get enough of each other, like people who were desperately, passionately in love. For a moment, maybe 2 seconds, maybe an eternity, nobody moved. Sarah stood in the doorway, holding a lunch basket meant to celebrate her husband's promotion, watching that same husband kiss another woman with more passion than he'd shown her in months. Maybe years. Victoria saw her first. Her blue eyes widened over David's shoulder, and she pulled back from the kiss with a sharp intake of breath. "David," she whispered, but not in passion this time, in warning. David turned around, and Sarah watched his face go through a series of expressions that she would replay in her mind thousands of times in the weeks to come. Confusion first, as if he couldn't understand why his wife would be in his office. Then recognition. Then horror. Then something that looked almost like relief. "Sarah," he breathed, his voice cracking on her name. The lunch basket fell from her hands this time, and Sarah didn't try to catch it. It hit the floor with a crash that seemed to echo through the entire building. The champagne bottle shattered, sending glass and golden liquid across the expensive carpet. The truffle pasta container popped open, spreading David's favorite meal across the floor like evidence of Sarah's naive devotion. The red roses lay scattered among the broken glass and spilled food, their petals already wilting under the harsh office lights. Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I brought you lunch. To celebrate." It was such an absurd thing to say, such a heartbreakingly innocent statement in the face of such betrayal, that Victoria actually let out a small, inappropriate laugh before covering her mouth with her hand. David stepped away from Victoria, straightening his tie with shaking hands. His hair was messed up where her fingers had been running through it, and there was lipstick on his collar. Lipstick that wasn't Sarah's shade, would never be Sarah's shade. "Sarah, I can explain," he started, and even in her shock, Sarah felt a surge of anger at the cliché. Of all the things he could say, he chose the most predictable, most insulting response possible. "Explain?" Sarah's voice was getting stronger now, though her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. "Explain what exactly?" "How you were, how she was." She couldn't finish the sentence. The words wouldn't come. Victoria had composed herself with the efficiency of someone used to handling crises. She straightened her suit jacket and smoothed down her hair, transforming from a woman caught in passion back into the polished CEO in a matter of seconds. "Sarah," Victoria said, her voice professional but not unkind, "perhaps we should all sit down and discuss this like adults." "Adults?" Sarah's voice cracked on the word. "Adults? You want to discuss this like adults?" She gestured wildly at the scene. The messed up hair, the lipstick stains, the obvious evidence of an intimate relationship that had been going on behind her back for God knows how long. "How long?" Sarah asked suddenly, the question erupting from somewhere deep in her chest. "How long has this been going on?" David and Victoria exchanged a look, a quick, meaningful glance that spoke of shared secrets and intimate knowledge. That look hurt almost as much as walking in on them kissing. It was a look of two people who knew each other's thoughts, who had inside jokes and shared memories that didn't include Sarah. "Sarah, please," David said, taking a step toward her. "Let me explain." "Don't." Sarah held up her hand, and something in her voice made him stop. "Don't take another step toward me. Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me." Her voice was quiet, but there was something in it, a kind of devastation so complete that it commanded respect even from the people who had caused it. "I asked you a question," Sarah continued, and now her voice was getting stronger, fueled by a rage she didn't even know she possessed. "How long?" Victoria was the one who answered, probably figuring that honesty was the best policy now that they'd been caught. 8 months, she said simply. 8 months. Sarah's mind reeled, calculating backwards. 8 months ago was January, David's birthday. Sarah had thrown him a surprise party, had invited all their friends and family. She'd stayed up until 3 a.m. making his favorite cake from scratch, had spent 2 weeks secretly coordinating schedules with their loved ones. 8 months ago, David had given a speech at that party about how lucky he was to have Sarah as his wife, how she was his anchor and his inspiration. 8 months ago, he'd kissed her in front of all their friends and told her he loved her more than life itself. 8 months ago, he'd already been cheating on her with his boss. My birthday, Sarah whispered, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. You started this affair right around my birthday. Neither of them denied it. Actually, Victoria said with the brutal honesty of someone who no longer saw any point in pretending, it started the night of David's birthday party. We were working late on the Morrison account, and we both stayed to clean up after client dinner. One thing led to another. Sarah felt like she was going to vomit. The night of David's birthday party. He'd come home late, telling her he had to finish up some work. She'd saved him a piece of cake and reheated his dinner. She'd been so understanding, so proud of his dedication to his job. She'd been such a fool. The Morrison account, Sarah repeated numbly. You missed our anniversary dinner for the Morrison account. Sarah, David started. No. Sarah's voice was sharp now, cutting. No, you don't get to Sarah me. You don't get to explain or justify or minimize this. You missed our anniversary. You missed my birthday. You missed Christmas morning because you had to check on something at the office. How many times, David? How many times did you lie to my face so you could be with her? The silence in the room was deafening. Even the building's air conditioning seemed to have stopped humming. I never meant for this to happen, David said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. But it did happen, Sarah replied, and her voice was steady now, cold as winter morning. It's been happening for 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of me being the supportive, understanding wife while you two. She gestured between them, unable to finish the sentence. Sarah, please try to understand, Victoria said, and there was something almost pitying in her voice that made Sarah's rage flare white-hot. David and I, we have a connection that goes beyond the physical. We understand each other's professional ambitions. We're both driven, both focused on success. It's a kind of partnership that... Partnership? Sarah's voice rose for the first time, and both David and Victoria took a step back. Partnership? I've been his partner for 8 years. I've supported every dream, sacrificed every personal goal, put a career ahead of my own happiness for 8 years. I am his partner. We're... Victoria said quietly, and that single word hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah stared at her, then at David, then back at Victoria. The truth of it was written all over their faces. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a relationship. They saw themselves as a couple. They saw Sarah as the obstacle, the inconvenience, the wife who didn't understand. Get out, David said suddenly, but he wasn't talking to Victoria. He was talking to Sarah. Please, just go home. We'll talk about this tonight. We'll figure this out. Sarah stared at her husband. This man she'd loved for 10 years, married for 8, sacrificed everything for her, and realized she was looking at a stranger who was asking her to leave, so he could continue his intimate moment with his lover, a stranger who was treating her like the intruder in this scenario. No, Sarah said, and her voice was quiet again, but there was steel in it now. No, I won't go home and wait for you to come up with a story that makes this my fault somehow. I won't sit in our kitchen, surrounded by the dinner I made for a man who doesn't even have the decency to end his marriage before starting a new relationship. She looked around David's new corner office, the office she'd been so proud of him for earning, the achievement they'd supposedly earned together through her sacrifices and his hard work. She looked at the family photo on his desk, the one of them on their last anniversary, where she was smiling at the camera while he was looking at her like she was his whole world. That photo was taken 2 months after his affair with Victoria had already begun. Keep the office, Sarah said, backing toward the door. Keep the promotion. Keep each other. But don't expect me to keep playing the role of the supportive wife who doesn't understand your ambitions. She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back one more time. You know what the saddest part is? She said, and for the first time since she'd opened that door, her voice shook with genuine emotion rather than rage. I would have understood. If you'd been honest, if you told me you weren't happy, if you'd given me a chance to fight for us or let you go with dignity, I would have understood. I loved you enough to want you to be happy, even if it meant being happy without me. David's face crumpled, And for a moment, he looked like the young man who'd spilled coffee on himself trying to work up the courage to talk to her all those years ago. But instead, Sarah continued, you made me into a fool. You let me plan surprise lunches and make anniversary dinners and throw birthday parties while you were building a whole other life behind my back. You let me love you with everything I had while you were giving your heart to someone else. She stepped over broken glass and spilled food, the remnants of her surprise, her love, her naive trust, and walked toward the door. Sarah, wait. David called after her, but she didn't turn around. Goodbye, David, she said without looking back. Enjoy your partnership. And Sarah Martinez walked out of her husband's office, past the curious stares of his co-workers, past the receptionist who'd always been so friendly, past the elevators and down 15 flights of stairs, because she couldn't bear the thought of being trapped in a small space with her own devastation. She walked out of Henderson and Associates and into the parking garage where her car waited, loyal and unchanged, in a world that had just shifted completely off its axis. Sarah sat in her car for 47 minutes before she could trust herself to drive. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't get the key in the ignition, and every time she tried to take a deep breath, it came out as a sob that seemed to tear something loose in her chest. The parking garage was concrete and shadows, the perfect place to fall apart without witnesses. She leaned her forehead against the steering wheel and let herself cry, really cry, for the first time since she'd walked into that office. The tears came in waves, each one carrying a different realization, a different memory recontextualized by betrayal. Every late night David had worked, every missed dinner, every time he'd come home distracted and distant, claiming he was just stressed about a project. Every time she tried to initiate intimacy and he'd been too tired, too preoccupied, too something to connect with his own wife. He hadn't been too tired. He'd been saving his energy for Victoria. When her phone buzzed with a text message, Sarah almost ignored it, but something made her look, and she saw David's name on the screen. Please come home. We need to talk. I love you. Sarah stared at the message until the words blurred together. He loved her? He loved her? This was what love looked like to him. 8 months of lies and betrayal and elaborate deception? She typed back with fingers that felt disconnected from her body. Don't you have somewhere else to be? His response came immediately. I ended it, right after you left. It's over with Victoria. I'm coming home now. Please be there. Sarah read the message 3 times before the cruel irony of it hit her. He'd ended it, as if that fixed anything. As if 8 months of betrayal could be erased with one conversation. As if she should be grateful that her husband had decided to stop cheating on her only after he got caught. But despite every rational thought in her head, despite every ounce of self-respect she had left, Sarah found herself driving home, not because she believed his apologies would fix this, but because she needed to look him in the eye and ask the questions that were eating her alive. She needed to understand how the man who'd promised to love and cherish her had become someone capable of such calculated deception. Their house looked exactly the same as it had that morning when she'd left, humming and excited about surprising her husband. The garden she'd planted was still blooming. The porch swing David had built for their 3rd anniversary was still swaying gently in the breeze. But Sarah felt like an alien visiting from another planet as she walked up the front steps. Everything looked the same, but everything was different. This house, which had been her sanctuary, her pride and joy, their shared dream, was it all built on lies? How long had David been bringing Victoria here in his mind, comparing Sarah to his lover? Finding Sarah lacking, David's car was already in the driveway, which meant he'd probably broken several speed limits getting home. Good. She hoped he'd been as desperate and frantic as she felt. He met her at the front door before she could even get her key out, and Sarah was struck by how different he looked than he had just 2 hours ago. The confident, successful executive was gone. In his place was a man who looked haunted, desperate, younger somehow in his obvious distress. Sarah, thank God, he said, reaching for her. Don't. Sarah stepped back, and David's hands fell to his sides. Don't touch me. Don't act relieved. Don't pretend this is some kind of homecoming. They stood in their own foyer, staring at each other like strangers. This entryway where they'd kissed goodbye 1,000 mornings, where David had carried her over the threshold as his bride, where they'd slow dance to music only they could hear on quiet Saturday nights. Can we at least sit down? David asked. Please. Sarah walked past him into their living room and sat on the chair. Not the couch where they usually cuddled, but the armchair that was clearly meant for one person. David hesitated, then sat on the couch across from her, the coffee table creating a barrier between them that felt both physical and metaphorical. I don't even know where to start. David said, running his hands through his hair. The same gesture that had once been endearing and was now just evidence of his stress. Start with the truth, Sarah said, and her voice was steady now, cold and clear. Start with the whole truth, not some edited version designed to make you feel better about yourself. David took a shaky breath. It started exactly when Victoria said it did. 8 months ago, after my birthday party. We were working late, and we started talking about ambition and success and what we wanted from life. She understood things about the business world that you don't. Sarah flinched at the casual cruelty of the statement, but she didn't interrupt. One thing led to another. David continued, using that phrase that unfaithful spouses have been using for decades to minimize their choices. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Bullshit. The word came out sharp and clean, and David looked startled. Sarah rarely cursed, rarely raised her voice, rarely challenged him directly. It didn't just happen, David. You made a choice. You made hundreds of choices over 8 months. You chose to call her. You chose to meet her. You chose to touch her. You chose to lie to me. You chose to build an entire relationship behind my back. You're right, David said quietly. You're absolutely right. Tell me about those choices, Sarah continued, and there was something relentless in her voice now. Tell me about every anniversary you missed for her, every birthday, every time you came home late, and I kept your dinner warm, thinking you were working so hard for us, for our future. David's face crumpled. Sarah, please. Tell me. Sarah's voice rose for the first time since she'd been home. Tell me about Christmas morning, when you left to check on something at the office. Where did you really go, David? Her apartment, he whispered. And Valentine's Day, when you said you had to work late on the Peterson account. Her apartment. And our anniversary, when you missed dinner because of that important client meeting. David was crying now, but Sarah felt no sympathy. We went to dinner. To Romano's, the same restaurant where you picked up lunch today. Romano's, the place where Sarah and David had gone on their first date. The place where he'd taken his mistress while his wife sat alone at their anniversary table, making excuses to the waiter about why her husband was late. Mrs. Romano knows, doesn't she? Sarah asked, pieces clicking together with sickening clarity. When I picked up a lunch today, she said I was lucky to have a husband who loved me so much. But she's seen you there with Victoria, hasn't she? David nodded miserably. So not only have you been lying to me for 8 months, Sarah continued, her voice getting quieter and more dangerous, but you've been humiliating me in public, making me into the pathetic wife who doesn't know her husband is cheating on her. How many people know, David? How many people have been looking at me with pity while I bragged about your promotions and your success? It wasn't like that, David said weakly. What was it like then? Sarah leaned forward. Explain to me what it was like. Explain to me how you could come home to me every night. Let me cook your dinner and wash your clothes and support your dreams while you were falling in love with another woman. I never stopped loving you, David said, and he actually seemed to believe it. Sarah stared at him in amazement. You never stopped loving me? You think that makes us better? You think love is something you can divide up, portion out, give pieces of to different people? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Sarah stood up, pacing now because sitting still was impossible. What did you mean when you told Victoria that I was simple, that I didn't understand your ambition? What did you mean when you said she made you feel like the man you were meant to be? David looked genuinely surprised that she'd heard that part of the conversation. You thought I left right away, didn't you? Sarah continued. You thought I walked in, saw you kissing, and ran. But I heard it all, David. I heard you talk about me like I was some kind of burden you had to bear, some simple little wife who didn't understand your greatness. I didn't mean it like that, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. How did you mean it? Sarah asked, because from where I was standing, it sounded like you meant exactly like that. The silence stretched between them, filled with 8 years of marriage and 8 months of betrayal and the complete destruction of everything Sarah had believed about her life. I want you to tell me one thing, Sarah said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, and I want you to be honest for maybe the first time in 8 months. Do you love her? David opened his mouth, probably to deny it, but something in Sarah's face stopped him. She looked like a woman who had nothing left to lose, who would know if he lied, who deserved at least one moment of truth in the wreckage of their marriage. Yes, he said finally, I love her. Sarah closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, something fundamental had changed. The desperate hope she'd been clinging to, that this was just physical, just a mistake, just something to work through, was gone. Then why are you here? She asked. If you love her, if she understands you in ways I never could, if she makes you feel like the man you were meant to be, then why did you end it? Why are you sitting in our living room trying to save a marriage with a woman you just described as simple and unambitious? David looked like he was drowning. Because I made a commitment to you. Because we have a life together. Because I can't just throw away 8 years of marriage. But you can throw away 8 months of love? Sarah asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Sarah watched her husband's face as he realized the impossible position he'd put himself in. He couldn't have both women. He couldn't keep Sarah as a stable, supportive wife while pursuing his passionate romance with Victoria. He couldn't claim to love both of them without diminishing what love actually meant. I need you to leave, Sarah said suddenly. What? I need you to pack a bag and leave. Tonight. I can't think with you here. I can't process this with you looking at me like I'm the one who's being unreasonable. David stood up, panic in his eyes. Sarah, no. We can work this out. I'll do anything. Counseling, therapy, whatever you want. Just don't ask me to leave. You already left, Sarah said, and her voice was so quiet he had to lean forward to hear her. You left 8 months ago. You just got to tell me. Please, David begged. And this man who'd been so confident in his lover's arms was now desperate, broken. Please don't do this. I made a mistake, but it's over. I chose you. I chose our marriage. You chose me after you got caught, Sarah corrected. You chose me because Victoria is your boss, and you can't afford to lose your job. You chose me because I'm safe and convenient, and I'll take you back because that's what good wives do. The accuracy of her assessment was written all over David's face. But here's the thing, Sarah continued, walking toward the stairs. I may be simple, David, but I'm not stupid. And I may not understand corporate ambition, but I understand self-respect. She paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at her husband. This man she loved with everything she had. This man who'd repaid that love with betrayal and lies and casual cruelty. I need you to be gone when I come downstairs, she said. Pack whatever you need for a few days. We'll figure out the rest later. Sarah, please. And David... Sarah's voice stopped in mid-plea. Next time you decide to throw away a marriage for someone who understands your ambition, have the decency to end it first. The wife is always the last to know, but she doesn't have to be humiliated in the process. Sarah climbed the stairs to their bedroom, the room where they'd made love as teenagers, where they'd planned their future, where she'd waited up for him countless nights while he was building a life with another woman. Behind her, she heard David moving around, opening closets, packing clothes. She heard him pause outside the bedroom door, probably want to say something, probably wanting one more chance to explain or apologize or minimize what he'd done. But Sarah had locked the door, and for the first time in 8 months, David didn't have access to something he wanted. 20 minutes later, she heard the front door close and his car pull out of the driveway. Sarah sat on their bed, her bed now, and looked around a room that suddenly felt too big and too empty and too full of memories she wasn't sure she wanted to keep. But for the first time since she'd walked into that office, Sarah wasn't crying. She was thinking. And what she was thinking about was whether the woman who'd sacrificed everything for love was strong enough to sacrifice love for herself. I need to pause here for a moment, because I know many of you are feeling Sarah's pain right now. I know some of you have been where she is, discovering that the person you trusted most in the world has been lying to your face while you supported their dreams and sacrificed your own happiness. Tell me in the comments, what would you do in Sarah's shoes? Would you try to work it out? Would you walk away? Have you ever been faced with a choice between forgiveness and self-respect? And if you're not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button now. Sarah's story is far from over, and what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about strength, forgiveness, and what it really means to love yourself enough to demand better. Because the woman who walked into that office with a lunch basket is not the same woman who just sent her cheating husband packing. Sarah is about to discover something about herself that she never knew existed. But first, she has to survive the hardest part, learning how to live with the choice she's made. The first night alone in her house, Sarah didn't sleep. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw David and Victoria press against that desk. Heard Victoria's voice calling her simple. Felt the weight of 8 months of lies crushing down on her chest like a physical thing. She wandered to the house at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., seeing their life together with new eyes. The kitchen where she'd packed David's lunches every morning. Had he been taking those lunches to share with Victoria? The living room where they cuddled on Sunday mornings. Had he been thinking about Victoria while holding her? The wedding photos on the mantel. Had their marriage been alive from the beginning, or just for the last 8 months? By dawn, Sarah had made a decision. She couldn't stay in this house, surrounded by memories that felt contaminated now. She called in sick to work, the first personal day she'd taken all year, and drove to her sister Maria's house across town. Maria took one look at Sarah's face and pulled her inside without asking questions. That's the thing about sisters. They know when your world has ended just by looking at you. Coffee or wine? Maria asked, leading Sarah to the kitchen. It's 7 a.m., Sarah said automatically. Coffee or wine? Maria repeated, and Sarah almost smiled for the first time in 18 hours. Coffee, but ask me again in an hour. Maria poured 2 enormous mugs and sat down across from Sarah at the kitchen table where they'd done homework together as kids, where they planned Sarah's wedding, where they'd shared 1,000 conversations about life and love and dreams. Tell me, Maria said simply. So Sarah told her. Everything. The surprise lunch, the voices behind the door, Victoria's cruel assessment of her character, David's passionate confession of love for another woman, the 8 months of lies and betrayal and humiliation. She told Maria about the broken champagne bottle and the spilled pasta and the wilted roses, about David's pathetic attempts to minimize his choices, about the way he tried to make her feel grateful that he'd chosen her after getting caught. Maria listened without interrupting, her face growing darker with each revelation. When Sarah finished, her sister was quiet for a long moment. I never liked him, Maria said finally. What? Sarah was genuinely shocked. Maria had been David's biggest supporter for years, had praised him at family gatherings, had told everyone how proud she was of Sarah for finding such a devoted husband. I never liked him, Maria repeated. He was always, I don't know how to explain it, like he was doing you a favor by being with you, like he was settling for the sweet elementary school teacher because he couldn't get the type of woman he really wanted. Sarah stared at her sister. You never said anything. Because you loved him. Because you were happy. And I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was being overprotective. Maria reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. But I wasn't wrong, was I? He did think he was settling for you. Until he found someone he thought was better. The truth of it hit Sarah like a physical blow. All those years of feeling grateful to David for choosing her, of working so hard to be worthy of his love, of sacrificing her own dreams to support his. Had she always known, deep down, that he saw her as less than what he deserved? I'm such an idiot, Sarah whispered. No. Maria's voice was sharp. No, you're not an idiot. You're a woman who loved someone with everything you had. You're a woman who kept promises and honored commitments and believed the best about someone who didn't deserve it. That doesn't make you an idiot. That makes you better than he is. Sarah spent the next 3 days at Maria's house, sleeping in the guest room that had been her childhood refuge during family fights and teenage heartbreaks. Maria took vacation time to stay with her, bringing Sarah meals she couldn't eat and cups of tea that went cold while Sarah stared out the window, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life she'd never planned to live alone. On day 4, David started calling, not just once or twice, but constantly. 15, 20 calls a day. When Sarah blocked his number, he called from work. When she blocked that number, he called from Victoria's phone, the irony of which wasn't lost on either of them. The voicemails were devastating in their desperation. David crying, begging, promising to change, swearing that ending things with Victoria was proof of his commitment to their marriage. He talked about counseling, about starting fresh, about how much he missed her cooking and her laugh and the way she hummed while doing dishes. He misses your services, Maria said after listening to one particularly pathetic message. He doesn't miss you. He misses having someone take care of him while he lives his secret life. But even knowing Maria was right, Sarah found herself wavering. 8 years of marriage don't disappear in 4 days, and the lonely nights in the guest room were filled with memories of the good times. David bringing her soup when she was sick, dancing in their kitchen to songs on the radio, the way he used to trace patterns on her back when she couldn't sleep. Had all of that been fake? Or had there been real love there? Love that had gotten buried under ambition and opportunity and the intoxicating attention of a powerful woman who understood his professional dreams? On day 7, Sarah's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Against her better judgment, she answered. Sarah? It's Victoria. Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. What do you want? I wanted to apologize, Victoria said, and she sounded genuinely remorseful. What happened in my office, the way you found out, that was terrible. You deserve better than that. Yes, Sarah said simply. I did. David is miserable, Victoria continued. He's been calling me, begging me to talk to you, to convince you to give him another chance. Sarah felt a spark of anger. Even now, David was asking other people to fight his battles for him. Are you calling to do that? Sarah asked. To convince me to take back the husband you were sleeping with? No, Victoria said, and there was something almost sad in her voice. Actually, I'm calling to tell you that you should run, as fast and as far as you can. Sarah was quiet, not sure she'd heard correctly. David doesn't love you, Victoria continued, and the words hit Sarah like ice water. I don't think he's capable of loving anyone the way you deserve to be loved. He loves the idea of being loved. He loves having someone worship him and support him and make him feel important. But when it comes to actually putting someone else's needs first, to making sacrifices for love instead of just accepting them, he can't do it. Then why were you with him? Sarah asked. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Because I thought we were the same. Ambitious, driven, focused on success above all else. I thought he was finally with someone who understood that relationships are partnerships, not one person constantly giving while the other person takes. And now I realize that David doesn't want a partner. He wants an audience. He wants someone to admire his success and forgive his failures and never, ever ask him to choose between his own comfort and their happiness. Sarah felt tears starting again, but they were different tears now. Not just tears of heartbreak, but tears of recognition, of finally understanding something she'd been too close to see. He would have done this to me too. Eventually, Victoria said quietly. Found someone new to make him feel important. Someone who thought he was more successful, more powerful, more worthy of worship than I am. The only difference is that you actually loved him. I just loved what he represented. After Victoria hung up, Sarah sat in Maria's guest room and finally understood what she'd been struggling to accept for 7 days. This wasn't about forgiveness. This wasn't about whether people could change or whether marriages could survive affairs or whether love was enough to overcome betrayal. This was about whether Sarah loved herself enough to demand better than a man who saw her as an audience for his life rather than a partner in it. The answer, for the first time in her adult life, was yes. But knowing what she needed to do and actually doing it were two different things. Because David wasn't giving up. On day 10, he showed up at Maria's house with flowers and tears and a speech about how he'd learned from his mistakes, how losing her had shown him what really mattered. Sarah met him on Maria's front porch, refusing to let him into the house that had become her sanctuary. I've been thinking, David said, holding out a bouquet of red roses, the same kind that scattered across his office floor when she dropped the lunch basket, about what you said, about choosing you only after I got caught. And you're right. But Sarah, sometimes people need to lose something to realize how precious it is. I'm not something you lost and found, Sarah said quietly. I'm not a set of keys you misplaced. I'm a human being who deserves to be cherished, not taken for granted until you get bored and find someone more exciting. You are cherished, David insisted. I cherish you. I made mistakes. But I'm here now, fighting for us. Doesn't that count for something? Sarah looked at this man she'd loved for 10 years, this man she'd built her entire adult life around, and felt something she'd never felt before when looking at him. Pity. David, she said gently, do you remember what you said to Victoria about feeling like the man you were meant to be when you were with her? David flinched. Sarah, I didn't mean. Do you remember telling her that I didn't understand your ambition? That I was simple. I was caught up in the moment. I didn't mean it. When you were with her, Sarah continued, ignoring his protests, you felt powerful, important, like you could conquer the world. Is that right? David nodded reluctantly. And what do you feel like when you're with me? The question hung in the air between them, and Sarah watched David's face as he struggled to find an answer that wouldn't damn him further. Loved, he said finally. Exactly, Sarah said softly. You feel loved, supported, comfortable, safe, but not powerful, not important, not like you could conquer the world. That's not. It's okay, Sarah interrupted. It's okay that I make you feel safe instead of powerful. It's okay that you need someone who challenges you and pushes you and makes you feel like you're capable of greatness. But it's not okay to keep me around as your safety net while you go find that elsewhere. David was crying now, and Sarah felt her heart break a little bit more, not for their relationship, but for him, for this man who was so afraid of being ordinary that he destroyed something beautiful in his desperate search for significance. I can be both, David said desperately. I can make you feel powerful too. We can push each other, challenge each other. No, Sarah said, and her voice was gentle but final. We can't, because that's not who we are together. And there's nothing wrong with that, David. There's nothing wrong with being the couple who feels safe and comfortable and deeply loved. But it's not enough for you, and pretending it is will only lead to more affairs, more lies, more betrayal. She took the roses from his hands, and for a moment David's face lit up with hope. Thank you, Sarah said, for 10 years of love, for showing me what it feels like to be someone's whole world, even if it wasn't forever, for giving me the chance to love someone with everything I had. Sarah, please. But I won't be your consolation prize anymore, she continued, setting the roses down on Maria's porch railing. I won't be the woman you settle for when an exciting option doesn't work out. I deserve to be someone's first choice, their only choice, their everything, not their backup plan. David grabbed her hands, and Sarah led him one last time. You are my everything, he said desperately. I chose you. I ended it with Victoria and chose you. You chose me because you got caught, Sarah said, gently pulling her hands free. And even if that wasn't true, even if you'd ended on your own, I can't unknow what I know now. I can't unfeel what it felt like to hear you describe me as simple and unambitious. I can't forget that you told another woman she understood you in ways I never could. People say things they don't mean when they're telling the truth, Sarah finished. When they're being honest about their feelings for the first time in months. She walked to Maria's front door, then turned back one more time. I hope you find what you're looking for, David. I hope you find someone who makes you feel powerful and important and like you can conquer the world. You deserve to be with someone who brings out the best in you. And you, David asked, his voice breaking, what about what you deserve? Sarah smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she'd managed in almost 2 weeks. I deserve to be with someone who already thinks I'm powerful and important and capable of conquering the world. Someone who doesn't need me to be different to love me completely. She went inside and closed the door, leaving David on the porch with his roses and his tears and the consequences of choices that couldn't be undone. That night, for the first time since she'd walked into that office, Sarah slept through the night, and when she woke up, she felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. But Sarah's journey wasn't over yet, because tomorrow was Sunday, and Sunday meant family dinner at her in-laws' house. Sunday meant facing David's parents, who adored her, and his siblings, who considered her part of the family, and explaining why their golden boy was staying at a hotel instead of going home to his devoted wife. Sunday meant making a choice between preserving David's reputation and claiming her own truth, and for the first time in her marriage, Sarah was ready to choose herself. The Martinez family Sunday dinners had been a tradition for 8 years. Every week, David's parents, Elena and Miguel, would prepare a feast for their 3 children and their families. David's older brother Carlos would come with his wife and 2 kids. His younger sister Isabel would arrive with whatever boyfriend she was dating that month. And Sarah and David would show up with homemade dessert and stories about their week. Sarah had missed exactly 2 Sunday dinners in 8 years. Once when she had the flu, and once where her own grandmother had passed away. She was a daughter-in-law who helped Elena in the kitchen, who remembered everyone's birthdays, who treated David's family like her own blood relatives. Which was why, when Sunday morning arrived, Sarah knew she had to go. Not for David, who had been calling and texting all morning begging her not to, but for Elena and Miguel and Carlos and Isabel, who had loved her long before they knew their golden boy was capable of such spectacular betrayal. Maria offered to come with her for moral support, but Sarah shook her head. This was something she needed to do alone. She dressed carefully for dinner, choosing a simple black dress that made her feel strong and elegant rather than the bright colors she usually wore to family gatherings. She did her hair and makeup with extra care, not because she would try to impress anyone, but because she needed the armor that came with looking put together when your life was falling apart. David's parents lived in the same house where he'd grown up, a warm, welcoming home filled with family photos and the smell of Elena's cooking. Sarah had her own key. Elena had given it to her on their first anniversary, saying that Sarah was family now and family didn't need to knock. Today, Sarah knocked. Elena answered the door with flour on her apron, and a huge smile that faltered when she saw Sarah's face. Mija, Elena said, using the Spanish endearment she called Sarah since their engagement. What's wrong? Where's David? He's not coming today, Sarah said simply. But I want to talk to all of you. Is everyone here? Elena's motherly instincts were clearly screaming that something was very wrong, but she nodded and led Sarah into the living room where the rest of the family was gathered. Miguel was watching soccer on TV with Carlos and his 8-year-old son. Carlos's wife, Ana, was chasing their toddler around the coffee table. Isabel was painting her nails on the floor, chattering about her new job at the marketing firm downtown. "Where's my baby brother?" Carlos called out when he saw Sarah. "Don't tell me he's working again on Sunday." "Actually," Sarah said, and her voice carried enough weight that everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at her. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about." Elena must have sensed the gravity of the moment because she turned off the TV and gestured for everyone to sit down. Anna corralled the kids and sent them to play in the backyard. Isabel put away her nail polish and gave Sarah her full attention. "David and I are getting divorced," Sarah said, and the words came out clear and strong despite the way her heart was hammering in her chest. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena made a small sound of distress. Miguel's face went pale. Carlos looked like he'd been slapped. "What?" Isabel was the first to find her voice. "What do you mean divorced? You guys are like perfect together." Sarah almost laughed at the irony. Perfect together. If only Isabel knew how far from perfect they'd actually been. "David has been having an affair with his boss for the past 8 months, Sarah continued, and she watched the shock ripple through the room like a physical wave. "I found out 10 days ago when I went to surprise him with lunch to celebrate his promotion." Elena burst into tears. Not quiet tears, but the kind of heartbroken sobbing that comes from a mother realizing her child has become someone she doesn't recognize. "No," Miguel said, shaking his head. "No, that's not possible. David worships you, Sarah. He would never." "I walked in on them," Sarah said gently. "In his office. There's no mistake, no misunderstanding. He's been living a double life for 8 months, and I've been the fool who didn't see it." Carlos stood up abruptly and started pacing, his face dark with anger. "I'll kill him," he muttered. "I'll actually kill him. How could he do this to you? To this family?" "Carlos, sit down," Anna said quietly, but her own face was flushed with fury. "Does he want to work it out?" Elena asked through her tears. "Has he apologized? People make mistakes, Mija. Marriages can survive." "He ended the affair," Sarah said, "after he got caught. And yes, he wants to work it out. He's been calling and crying and begging for another chance." Hope flickered in Elena's eyes. "Then maybe—" "But I don't," Sarah interrupted gently. "I don't want to work it out." The room went quiet again, but this time the silence felt different, heavier, more final. "Why not?" Isabel asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice. "I mean, if he's really sorry if he ended it, if he wants to save your marriage." Sarah had been dreading this question, but now that it was here, she found she knew exactly how to answer it. "Because I finally realized that I deserve better than a husband who only appreciates me when he gets caught cheating." She stood up and walked to the mantel where dozens of family photos were displayed. Photos of graduations and birthdays and holidays. Photos of David and Sarah's wedding, where they looked so young and hopeful and completely in love. "For 8 years, Sarah said, her back to the family, "I've been trying to be worthy of David's love. I gave up job opportunities to support his career. I handled everything at home so he could focus on work. I made myself smaller and smaller, thinking that if I just loved him enough, supported him enough, sacrificed enough, he would finally see me as the amazing woman you all told me I was." She turned around to face them, and there were tears in her eyes now, but her voice remained steady. "But the truth is, David never saw me that way. To him, I was safe, comfortable, the woman who would always be there no matter how he treated me. He called me simple and unambitious to his lover. He said she understood him in ways I never could. And you know what? He was right." Elena started to protest, but Sarah held up her hand. "I am simple," Sarah continued. "I find joy in small things. I'm proud of my students when they finally understand fractions. I think a perfect evening is cooking dinner together and watching a movie on the couch. I don't understand corporate politics or the thrill of power games or what it feels like to want to conquer the world. There's nothing wrong with that," Miguel said firmly. "You're right," Sarah agreed. "There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it wasn't enough for David. And instead of being honest about that, instead of ending our marriage before looking elsewhere, he decided to have both. The stable, supportive wife at home and the exciting, ambitious lover at work." She wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "I spent 10 days trying to figure out if I could forgive him, if I could trust him again, if I could live with knowing that he'd found me lacking and gone looking for more. But the question I should have been asking was, why would I want to?" Carlos stopped pacing and looked at his sister-in-law with something that might have been respect. "I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering if I'm enough," Sarah continued. "I don't want to analyze every late night at work, every business trip, every conversation about his female colleagues. I don't want to be married to a man who sees me as his consolation prize. But he chose you, Isabel said desperately. In the end, he chose you. He chose me because he got caught and Victoria is his boss, Sarah replied. He didn't choose me because he realized I was amazing. He chose me because I was convenient and forgiving and wouldn't cause problems for his career. Elena was crying harder now, and Sarah's heart broke for this woman who had welcomed her so completely into the family, who was now watching that family fracture because of her son's choices. Sarah knelt down in front of Elena's chair and took her hands. I love you, Sarah said softly. I love all of you. You gave me 8 years of feeling like I belonged somewhere, like I was part of something beautiful. But I can't stay married to David just to keep my place in this family. You'll always be part of this family, Elena said through her tears. Divorce or no divorce, you're my daughter. Will I? Sarah asked gently. When David brings Victoria to next year's Christmas dinner, will there still be a place for me? When they get married and have children, will you remember that I was here first? Or will it be easier to pretend this chapter never happened? Elena's face crumpled because they both knew the answer. Families survive by adapting, by accepting new members, and eventually letting old wounds heal. Sarah would become the first wife, the one who couldn't forgive, the one who broke up the family over ancient history. I won't do that to you, Sarah continued. I won't put you in a position of choosing between your son's new life and loyalty to his ex-wife. I won't make Sunday dinners awkward for the next 20 years. She stood up and looked around the room at these people who had loved her, who had made her feel like she had a big, warm, chaotic family for the first time in her life. I need to go now, Sarah said, before David gets here, and this turns into a scene that we'll all regret. Where will you go? Anna asked quietly. What will you do? Sarah smiled, and for the first time in 2 weeks, it was a smile full of possibility rather than pain. I'm going to figure that out, she said. For the first time in my adult life, I'm going to make decisions based on what I want instead of what everyone else needs from me. She hugged each of them goodbye. Elena clinging to her like she could prevent a divorce through sheer force of love. Miguel whispering that she would always be his daughter. Carlos promising to beat David up if she changed her mind. Isabel crying because she was losing the sister she'd never had. As Sarah walked to her car, she heard David's voice behind her. He must have arrived just as she was leaving, must have seen her car in the driveway and known that his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. Sarah, wait! She turned around and saw him running toward her, still in the suit he'd probably slept in, his hair disheveled, his face desperate. What did you tell them? He demanded. The truth, Sarah replied calmly. David's face went pale. You had no right. This is between us. No, Sarah said, and there was steel in her voice now. This stopped being just between us the moment you brought Victoria into our marriage. This stopped being just between us when you made me into a fool in front of everyone we know. This stopped being just between us when you decided that your reputation was more important than my dignity. They're my family, David said desperately. And they were mine too, Sarah replied. But you made that choice for both of us when you decided to cheat rather than just ending our marriage honestly. David looked back toward the house, probably calculating the damage, wondering how he could spin this to minimize his culpability. You've destroyed everything, he said, and there was venom in his voice now. Our marriage, my relationship with my family, my reputation. Was your revenge really worth all that? Sarah stared at her husband, her soon-to-be ex-husband, and realized that even now, even after being caught and confronted and forced to face the consequences of his choices, he still saw himself as a victim in this story. This isn't revenge, David, she said quietly. This is me finally choosing myself. She got in her car and drove away, leaving David standing in his parents' driveway to face a family dinner where, for the first time in his life, he wouldn't be the golden child, where he would have to answer for his choices instead of being protected from their consequences. As Sarah drove back to Maria's house, she felt something she hadn't expected, relief. The hardest conversation of her life was over. The family that had loved her now knew the truth. David could no longer control the narrative or paint himself as a devoted husband whose wife had inexplicably abandoned him. For the first time in 10 days, Sarah felt free. That night, she sat down with a notebook and made a list. Not a list of everything she'd lost, but a list of everything she might gain. A new apartment, chosen just for her. A job where she could focus on her students without worrying about getting home in time to make David's dinner. Weekends to herself to read and paint and take long walks without feeling guilty for not doing something productive. Maybe travel. maybe graduate school, maybe a relationship with someone who thought she was fascinating exactly as she was. Maybe, for the first time since she was 22 years old, Sarah would find out who she was when she wasn't trying to be worthy of someone else's love. 3 months later, Sarah would run into Victoria at the grocery store. Victoria would tell her that she and David had tried to make it work, but that he'd been too broken by the divorce, too bitter about losing his family's respect, too focused on what he'd lost to appreciate what he gained. He's not a bad man, Victoria would say, but he's not ready to love anyone properly. I don't think he knows how. And Sarah, who by then would be settled in her own apartment, thriving in her new position as a reading specialist, dating a kind librarian who thought her love of children's literature was the most beautiful thing he'd ever encountered, would feel nothing but pity for the man who'd thrown away something real in search of something that made him feel important. But that night, sitting in Maria's guest room with her notebook and her plans and her hard-won freedom, Sarah didn't know about any of that yet. All she knew was that for the first time in her adult life, she was choosing herself, and it felt like coming home. And that's where Sarah's story ends. Not with revenge or bitterness, but with the quiet strength that comes from finally understanding your own worth. She didn't win by destroying David or by proving she was better than Victoria. She won by walking away from a situation that diminished her and choosing to build a life where she could flourish. Before you go, I need you to know something. If you're watching this and seeing yourself in Sarah's story, if you're in a relationship where you're constantly trying to prove your worth, where you're making yourself smaller to make someone else comfortable, where you're accepting crumbs and calling it love, you deserve better. You deserve to be someone's first choice, their priority, their everything. And if you've been where Sarah was, if you've had to make the choice between forgiveness and self-respect, please tell your story in the comments below. Share your strength with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think or feel or remember what you're worth, please hit that subscribe button right now. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, but it connects you to a community of people who believe in the power of choosing yourself. When you subscribe, you're joining thousands of others who understand that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from something that's killing you slowly. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. The link is in the description, because there are more stories like Sarah's out there. Stories of ordinary people making extraordinary choices. Stories of finding strength you didn't know you had. Stories of learning that the love you've been looking for everywhere else has been inside you all along. Thank you for listening to Sarah's story. Thank you for believing that everyone deserves a love that doesn't require them to be smaller, quieter, or less than who they are. Until next time, remember, you are worth fighting for, even if you have to be the one doing the fighting.